We're an AWS born in the cloud, sort of cloud native consultancy, and I'll talk more about that when I introduce what we're talking about tonight. But we're looking for people that are security aware as well as security practitioners. Anyone here a security practitioner looking for a new gig? Maybe. If we can have an anonymous conversation separately if you like.
Yeah, also Matt, who's going to be speaking with me, he's looking for a couple of people. I'm always open to receiving a resume or two. So
speaking of Matt, we should do a little bit of a thank you to our sponsors. So this is, as Adam said when we first started, I've got to put my old man eyes on because I've been around this game for a long time. Adam said, you know, that this is our first or inaugural. Never use a big word when a diminutive one will suffice. Our first 0 days meetup, and we're planning to have many more, but partly it's been made possible by a couple of sponsors. First one was Hamish from Cloud Conformity. Are you here, Hamish? Was here, maybe had to make a run. And Matt, who was going to be here, in fact, I'm just the stooge as the stand-in, because Matt was going to be here, but had this pathetic little excuse, like I think they had a baby today.
Correction, his wife had a baby.
Well, yeah, when I say they, you know, always claim credit for, you know, success has many fathers, failure is an orphan. Yeah. So they had a baby today, which is terrific, but it means he's, for some reason, not shown up tonight. But Matt from, who's he work for? ANUM. ANUM are also sponsoring the cost, you know, bearing part of the cost of drinks and pizza and stuff. So big thank you to our sponsors. And of course, CMD as part of the Mantle Group. All right, and I've kind of started to say a little bit about why I'm sitting on the stool, but who are you and what are you doing here?
My name's Edward Farrell. I run a cybersecurity practice called Mercury. So usually, Matt and I have been doing a few of these events. In fact, we did one about 2 years ago, and we got a really good bit of banter going between us at one of the DevSecOps meetups. And so,
it's been a sort of a regular stand-up gig, has it?
Yeah. Well, it's. I think we can actually achieve some really interesting stuff by having a really good conversation on stage, and a lot of it is you know, very much that didactic of we'll start exploring topics and just off the cuff and off our experiences over the last few weeks, all of a sudden all this cool stuff will start.
And these guys are what, just a fly on the wall, is that it?
Well, banter. Just start yelling stuff at us, guys.
Oh, that's a dangerous place to be. Okay, so hang on a minute. I've got to try and be this guy who has this witty repartee with you, right? I'm not really a security professional, right? I just happen to work for an IT company that does security.
All right, I've got to stop you right there on that one. So this is something that always frustrates me, is the assumption of I have to be a security guy, and it's I always like the. Has anyone here seen that movie Layer Cake?
Daniel Craig.
It was pretty much his rehearsal for James Bond, but the first 5 minutes are pretty much all I've learned about business. And there was this one line where he's saying, I'm not a drug dealer, I'm a businessman whose commodity happens to be
cocaine. I think it was.
Yeah. So
I'm not an IT security guy. I just happen to work in IT, and we do security. So
I mean, it's the same sort of deal, though. I mean, cocaine is a commodity, security is a commodity. Your customers are all referred to as users. It's all the same.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah. Terrific. But I think there's a lot of things that can sort of be derived.
So you've been doing the security gig for a while?
About 15 years.
Okay. I've been in IT about 3 times that long. Oh, not quite. Hang on, my maths is terrible there. But I've been in IT since the early 80s. I'll let you date me. Yes, those grey whiskers did come from somewhere. And I've I guess, over that time, seen a change in the kind of threats and security stuff. And I worked with a lot of guys that call themselves security. Mm-hmm. And I guess I've seen some really helpful ones. And then there's the ones in my career that I've referred to as the Department of No, where, you know, enterprise architect or a guy trying to write some software, and I do all my hard work, try and get, and then someone just at the end says no. Is that what security's all about?
Well, let's come back here. Who's been in the industry for more than 10 years, or at least has it on their LinkedIn bio, along with the influencer title in B2B marketing? Yeah, cool. So a few of us have been. I won't completely destroy LinkedIn bios, but I'm sure we've all seen them. And then security expert. I know you're a recruiter. Okay. But a couple of us have sort of been in this industry for a while. And I mean, if you remember 20, 30 years ago.
I do remember 20, 30 years ago, yeah.
So you've still got your memory function. You're not that
only
old.
just.
Yeah. So, but if you remember, coders were problem solvers, people that had to logically think through problems.
Yep, been there.
Your network engineer. So I started off in a NOC. And your network engineers were the guys that went through the CCNA training. They were fastidious looking at rule sets. They were able to just actually set out a Cisco config. Fairly quickly, fairly easy off the back.
Half of the people's eyes are glazing over, and half of them are going, "Yeah, that's really cool stuff. I remember that."
Yep. So Cisco's no, we're not. We don't have that much time. That's it. Those things. Yep. It makes the internet go.
Oh right. Yep. I'm good. Yep. I'm with you.
But we also had help desk people who were great with humans and would go out and do problem solving. And then we had security, which, no one fitted into those areas. So all of a sudden you had people who couldn't problem solve, people who lacked the attention to detail, and were terrible at human skills. And
they'd be a great fit for security.
Well, we've now inherited that legacy. I mean, you think about it, this wasn't security was always the afterthought, which, our first speaker always alluded to, and it's always the takeaway line, your thought leader with the, polished white teeth.
Is that a bit like the element of a rent-a-cop? The private security guards versus the real police. That idea of he couldn't get a real job, so he's.
Yeah, probably just a little bit.
I just, in case he's got a longer reach. Yeah.
No, I completely get it. And look, I'm sure we've probably all been on the receiving end of a security expert that says no, which you've just alluded to there, which has kind of got us on this little tangent of if you are here making everyone's life unpleasant because you've taken on a cybersecurity job because you're here to dominate other human beings, probably not the right career path.
That's not one of the 52 job descriptions in there from David? No?
Sorry, I just saw someone try and run out.
Being on a power trip? Yeah, okay.
But no, so you get the point, though. People will power trip on this sort of stuff, and I think this is a big risk.
So if you've got a room full of security professionals here, and you're sort of on the inside, how do you stop people? How do you become valuable to the business?
Well, I'll come back to what we were saying before on being the no person. I had this with a security test about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I tried to actually engage the governance and risk compliance manager and say, hey, look, I know my last internal test, you didn't like how we did risk ratings. We were using a NIST standard as opposed to an ISO standard.
Sadly, I know what that stuff means, which has been around a long time. Yep.
NIST is published by the US National Institute of Science and Technology.
Well done.
Whereas, ISO is published by ISO. I have my own personal opinion. NIST is quite prescriptive. ISO is airy-fairy, which means if you've just turned up, it looks pretty. Sorry, did anyone have any opinions on that?
Yeah, they're better than PCI DSS.
Yep. Everything is better than PCI DSS was the banter we had.
You want your life to be bad, go into FIPS.
Which one? 140? 201?
Biggest number.
Yeah, we can just keep counting. But yeah, back on subject there.
Mm-hmm.
It started turning into a case of all of your risk ratings were inflammatory. It's like, well, okay, let's actually go through them individually. It's like, well, if you have a look, the likelihood of getting hit by MS 1710 is actually fairly reasonable. I mean, all it takes is, we saw it in our second presentation there before, someone clicking on the wrong bit of software, malware executing, spreading through the network.
Just for those who haven't done sort of risk rating stuff, right? You look at the likelihood of something happening and the impact of...
Yeah, and the impact. So
that
we were arguing about likelihood and impact. So likelihood, we said fairly likely, likelihood's been informed by the fact that this has happened a couple of times to other people, and there's plenty of news articles on it. You don't need to go to the second page of Google search.
And then users are dumb and they will click. Yep.
Yeah, and then, you know, what's the impact? Well, everything's going to be ransomed. Do you have a means to recover? There's a really good security guy out of New Zealand, Adam Barlow, who talks about, well, likelihood and risk ratings. You know, risk consulting engineers are deciding a lot of them, or at least they think they are. Who picks likelihood?
Anyone do this kind of work, risk assessment?
Yep. Who's going to make the decision on what the likelihood of event's going to be? The business? Who reckons the business?
Who reckons the business is informed?
Who reckons that it's the attacker? So, yep, kind of. We've got 0 day here.
Technologists should do the likelihood. The business can do.
I'm the attacker. I'm going to pick if I'm going to exploit this bug.
Oh, okay.
So the
So the business can deal with impact.
yep. Well, the impact. It's my bug. I get to pick what I do with it. If I ransomware you, that's what that's going to be my impact.
Yeah, but if the impact is
There is nothing
$0,
behind it. If there is no sensitive information sitting behind the bug,
Then, well, then I'm just going to turn your box into my own crypto miner. I had that as an incident response 2 weeks ago.
this machine has been compromised, but not data has leaked.
Yep.
some electricity from.
Yeah, which
That's it.
I'm now thinking
and a
of that.
very high Amazon bill.
I'm now thinking of that dog emoji where he's just surrounded by fire. Yeah, this is fine. It's all good. Yep, we've just got a bit more electricity. Data hasn't been stolen though, so we're happy.
But I've embedded myself now as a place to keep exploring quietly in the rest of your network.
Yeah, possibly. And you know, we can go on these, you know, internet arguments of, you know, oh, well, NIST is better than ISO, or well, there's no risk here because there's no confidential data. But then again, that also needs to be informed by, well, what is the business doing? And this always comes back to, all right, what is cyber? I'll put that one out to the audience. Is it computers? At which point, why isn't it computer security? Why is it cyber security?
Is security a department?
Say again?
Is security a department?
Well, that's an entirely different question.
Say again? So, according to end users, cyber is
Everything
that
that plugs into a power outlet. So
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's. I'm just trying to remember the British author who actually coined the term. Not Gibson. It was another guy. I got into an argument about this with engineers the other week. Yes.
Do you know where that word comes from? Same word as Kubernetes. Sorry.
Nice. No. The audience participation's awesome. But you know, we even saw it in 1980 science fiction. So, and even the 1990 science fiction. So, William Gibson, the interaction between human beings, technology, the social environment, as well as the physical environment, and all this started to sort of span out. And this is kind of why we've gone from IT and computer security into cybersecurity, because
so much as it has that social aspect to it, social engineering.
yeah, pretty much it's. And you know, you started our conversation tonight with, you know, I'm just a businessman. It's like, well, there's certainly a business element to this.
Well, I mean, in terms of if you work in IT, you know, I've over my career worked right at the hardware level designing silicon. I've worked in network R&D, software development, enterprise architecture, and now I'm doing the cloud gig. Because in this industry, by the way, for you young blokes, you've got to reinvent yourself every 5 or 10 years, or you're out of work, right? Unless you've got a job for life in security. In that time, the whole, I guess, it's always been, the weakness has been in terms of security stuff. Yes, there's exploits and vulnerabilities, but the attack vector is through people.
Yeah. Yep. You know, we were talking. So the first speaker talked about attacks against, you know, say a mobile phone, which, to be honest, is actually quite expensive relative to, say, a social engineering attack, which is why fishing grandma is such big business.
With robo dialers and all that sort of stuff these days is quite lucrative.
Yeah. There was a comment you had before that I just wanted to come back in on.
If I say random words, will it trigger it?
It will trigger many things.
I'm not that brave.
This is an RSA. You're not trying to sell me something.
This is true.
I hope you're not. I'll just coming back to what we were talking about before on that argument I was having around governance and risk compliance individuals on, fundamentally this just came back to almost an empathy and a desire to actually, all right, let's understand what the problems are. And this is, I think, why Matt and I, and now you're in our little circle of having these sort of discussions is important to actually break down what the hell's going on so that we can actually solve problems, as opposed to, well, it's always China or it's always Russia or, it is cyber, therefore Russia's hacking us. And I think that's a big hype train that's
it's
really
a great safe
starting to
place
screw us around.
to retreat to if you want to feel safe, but it doesn't actually add any value.
Yep.
So yesterday, or the day before, the ASD, did they go on record saying that they think that the Parliament House email attack was run by China?
It's off record.
Or is that just a really strong rumour?
So the question was, did ASD go on record saying that China hacked Parliament House? I haven't tracked that. I've been head deep in.
It was a really lame email server.
Does anyone?
Agreed not to name vendors. Anyway.
Shit. Sorry. No. Well, if you okay. So I won't actually go down the tangent where it's like, well, the second it happened, I actually started having a hunt around, right, how would I have done this?
Well, the
So.
question more is, would our government name China, point at them for real, or is it some sort of backstory, play politics?
That would be. I think the phrase you're looking for is very courageous, Minister.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'd actually go there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it comes back to espionage is perfectly legal, which is something a lot of people forget is, espionage has always been a part of statecraft. So events, such as China doing a technical compromise, whilst it is an attack on sovereignty to an extent, could also come back to, well, it's spying, we spy on them, they spy on us. It happens. And so, unless you're in a state of war where you're actually going to, find someone guilty of spying and then hang them, it's just going to be one of those things, part and parcel. This is part of life. Because at the end of the day, all of a sudden you start confusing your foreign affairs and your actual international relations with, all right, well, all of that's now spying. The CIA fact book all of a sudden is a spy manual and we need to burn that. So it's like we start getting into these areas of, well, they're not actually necessarily, you create this massive grey space. So it's just, I just want to point that one out of, there's second and third order effects to making those accusations.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking. Do you think it was for the second and third order?
Yeah. Well, it's then it turns into, well, you're spying on us. No, we're not. And we start going around in circles, and it's quite unhealthy.
Probably most of us aren't going to be involved in any of that stuff day to day. Does anyone actually work for a government department? There you go. That explains the.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of businesses that we all work in, what do you reckon the biggest threat that most businesses will be facing is?
Biggest threat. I think that will always come down to context.
Fair call. Yeah. Okay.
So one of the things I'm now doing in a lot of my reports is writing out what I call a threat or attack vignette, which is say for example, just trying to think of a broad customer I can talk about. So say for example, you're a financial services firm. We'll probably allocate 2 or 3 vignettes to you of you're dealing with financial data that can be used to trade money, or you've got regulatory compliance that you need to meet. Here's 3 areas that we need to focus on, and this is going to be our priority of effort and how we're going to shape our services.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I'm always finding we come back and actually identify that the vast majority of problems are either patch management, access control and authorization, i.e. everyone has guard mode, or people just don't actually understand what their environment looks like.
So in terms of security, that's just basic hygiene factors, though.
Yeah, like none of this is ever going to be complex stuff. You don't need the high-end consultants of the world, high-end overpaid consultants.
Yep. Good value for money, I think, is the term you're looking for.
Oh yes. Yeah. Sorry. Can we edit that out too?
Yep.
But no, I think there's a fair price to pay, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are also pushing the wrong service. I think I was saying to you before I came up on stage was, we just completed a pen test, which was a fraction of the price of the SOC our client was using. The SOC these guys paying for is about $150,000 a month.
Yeah, okay.
And
small change, yeah.
Yeah, but the SOC failed to detect. They failed to detect Metasploit. They failed to detect any malware we loaded on about 100 different systems.
Hang on, you're in there loading on malware, is that?
Yes.
Okay. How do you?
I had permission.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, so that's okay then.
I had to get out of jail free card. But even when we were sending data, we actually had to we had to fabricate some data locally and just send a text file with 100 copies of this is notionally sensitive. This is notionally sensitive. So sending that out in clear text over the network just was not picked up.
Wow.
So
it's good money, isn't it? $100,000 for detecting nothing.
Well,
per month, right?
It's the thing and this is a real, frustrating thing. And Matt and I have talked about it at great length. Of you'll have a cybersecurity firm with a thought leader, an executive assistant to the thought leader to book them flights to their speaking engagements. They'll have 3 salespeople, and then some 19-year-old kid who's probably had nowhere near as much experience as yourself, trying to keep up and trying to deliver services that they just can't meet. And I think that is unfortunately probably my very narrow analysis of what I'm seeing a lot in the market out there.
Okay. Yeah.
So
the moral is we don't employ a SOC?
No, the moral is do your due diligence. And if you're not doing due diligence, then at least have some SLAs in place so that you can recoup your funds after the SOC doesn't deliver.
So does everyone know what a SOC is, what we're talking about here? No, I've got some nods and shakes. Maybe we should unpack some acronyms.
So Security Operations Center, the idea is these guys aggregate all of the log data that is getting generated across the network and are meant to identify security threats and risks as they pop up. SOCs are very effective if they're well trained, if the tools they're using are well honed, and if you have
Dave Lucci had a picture up in the first talk about what that it was incident response, I think, actually, but same thing.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yep. So we'd actually go from operations to, all right, we're now seeing a live incident. We now need to respond to this incident. Yep. And if your team's actually rehearsed properly, that's actually a massive asset to a business. The problem is, though, if all you're doing is collecting logs and then shooting reports 3 days after the fact, you're really not helping.
In fact, the red team exercise which you guys have done, that is the input to the SOC, right? That should go as an input
It's
to the SOC to build or the improve that
Probably repeat the question.
Yep. So the question is my job as a red teamer is to actually inform and shape the SOC. And yes, it is. Look, we spend a lot of our time, quite frankly, generating CSV files of that provide asset identification lists of here is everything we've been able to find. Are you tracking this? Are you aware of it? And here are all the vulnerabilities that we've also found. And also here's our attack path and here's how it looked like. Here are the times so that you can correlate it and now tune your tools appropriately. The frustrating thing is we did this exact same attack 1 year prior. Well, we not only did that attack, but we then also had an argument of, it's an internal network, no one will ever do this, so we also had to prove that we could...
Do it from outside?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So...
And 12 months on, no lessons learned?
No. And this comes back to what we talked about before of, if you're actually taking the time, learning things, spending your Tuesday nights here, listening to two guys talk up on stage, you're actually...
Probably ahead of the curve.
You are definitely not the slowest kid in Jurassic Park.
What was your entry vector?
For
that particular job, whatever it was, how did you get inside the network?
so originally it was a straightforward internal test. We only had a couple of days. So our attacks actually turned into hypotheticals of, all right, we're going to pay this staff member X amount of dollars because we know they have a gambling problem. Off the back of that, they're going to plug in a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi is going to host the internal network for MS1710. We'll go on from there. But we then started thinking about, okay, well, if you actually look at it, they're not doing proper HTTP filtering, so that's another vector. Are they doing SMTP filtering? We didn't know because we couldn't do any phishing emails. So there's all sorts of, there's a number of ways with which you can pull this stuff off. But it really, I have about 5 or 6 broad playbooks that we always play just because they're the things that we know and see.
Yeah.
And then we'll shape things off the back of, so for example, we've got a client that needs to conform with a standard around anti-money laundering. So we're taking ASVS and we're actually saying, okay, let's reorientate it to meet the requirements of anti-money laundering. So, yeah, it all...
So we've heard a few times tonight that if companies just did some basic hygiene things, we'd all be a lot further ahead. And it sounds like you're saying the same sort of thing in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to hire... Sorry, am I running out of power there?
Yeah.
We don't need to run out...
Yeah, it means you've spoken too long and Tom's turned you down. No.
You see, this is where you just start playing the violin music and walk me off. No, but I think we're investing a lot in security products. We're also inheriting the liabilities behind maintaining those products, and we're not spending enough time just doing basic 101 admin.
And education of your people. And
well, even proper education. I mean, the number of organisations that have just spun up that have decided to spin up a WordPress site that they don't patch for the next 3 years to sell user education awareness experiences, aka download our PowerPoint, and that's your security training. Here's your bill. I think that's another. I'm a little bit cynical on some of that.
Yeah, I had noticed that. I think the technical term's shit vendors, right? There was a question up here.
Just with regards to what you were saying before about the SOCs,
Mm-hmm.
is there a sort of definite percentage in terms of organisations that run their own SOCs or ones that outsource the SOCs? Because I'd assume that with regards to a security operations centre, they've got their own defined parameters of what exactly they're supposed to do. They're not always going to necessarily make those adjustments. Say you do a pen test 12 months back.
Yep.
You find a shitload of issues. You present that to the SOC and say, hey, we've just come in, literally like we've just walked through the street. There are no doors, no locks.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a party here and this is the outcome. There's a mess that you have to clean up. But in terms of those two situations of a SOC being run internally or outsourced, I'd assume if it's an internal SOC, they're going to pass that communication on to the design of the organisation to actually make those fixes and change the culture and change the design and so on.
Yep.
But with that situation they did nothing with it, then surely, as you pointed out, you've got your SLAs to say, well, can we ever
Yep.
refund for the last 12 months?
Can you paraphrase?
So the statement was, well, we've just found, so in the case we've used, we've found bugs 12 months ago that are still there 12 months later that just haven't been addressed. Surely the SOC, if I can just understand, surely the company that's been paying that SOC has to, demand a refund. Is that correct?
Well, no, but more a case of, obviously the SOC has received that information
Yep.
from you as the pen tester. They're not just going to sort of go, oh, yeah,
So, yeah, let me have a go at the paraphrase, right? Your hypothesis is that if it's an internal SOC, in other words, the organisation runs its own security operations, they're going to be a whole lot more diligent, perhaps, around learning the lessons from that than someone that you're paying externally and is only really held accountable through an SLA that might mean some credits on the bill.
Well,
Yep.
I suppose the main question would be, have you come across a situation, and you don't necessarily have to answer it, where there's an outsourced SOC that haven't necessarily passed on all the findings of a pen test to their client? They just paint the pretty picture and say, you're secure now.
I would think that your results don't go to the SOC, they go to the business, right?
They go to the business and
Yeah.
then go back out to the SOC,
Yeah.
and then the SOC is held
Yeah.
accountable, or a vendor's held accountable.
Yeah.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the business were the ones who needed to kick up the arse and smack in the head because they didn't follow.
Remediate.
Well, the business didn't enforce oversight, is what you're saying. And yeah, look, I would say that's probably a big thing that played into this organisation is there may not even been an understanding of how to do that. There was also, and this also comes back to how you actually engage with an external SOC and what their role is going to be.
Can I ask who when a business engages you,
Yep.
is it some head of security, a chief information security officer, or what?
It will depend. So certain what I call project engagements, i.e. we've just developing an app or we are in the process of developing an app, usually project manager or someone, their direct one up will engage us. If it's what I would classify as a whole of organisation assessment, it will be either someone at C-level, CIO particularly, or it will also actually be the audit and risk committee.
Okay, so I'm going to, because we're going to wrap up in a minute, and I'm going to bring it back to the question that I started with. So if you've done an assessment and you've found a bunch of stuff, and the organisation, and you're giving it back over to someone, I guess, who owns security function in that, and inside that organisation, security isn't necessarily viewed as cooperative amongst everybody else. Like, I mean, there's a whole lot of organisational politics around getting stuff addressed, right?
Yep.
So I guess I want to bring it back to, as security professionals, how do we make sure that the business that we work for views us as value add?
Well, so I had this conversation with a company that we're doing a lot of work with, where he said, okay, well, how do you actually justify, SPF records and DMARC? And he said,
Okay.
well, if you can demonstrate a reduction in emails that are delaying time and effort, that translates to a direct reduction in cost, and therefore you are saving the business money. Another one that we've had as well is, say, around patch management. All right, if we defined and implemented centralized patch management, that all occurs through this single console that we click a button, all of a sudden you're saving time and effort on an engineer having to log into every server and
do
apply
it
patches.
differently on every machine, and not quite
hope they
get it right.
actually did it right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, my favourite one as well is, so ASD has just had recommended fairly recently cutting away password expiration, because that was delaying, that meant 40% of your help desk calls were, hey, I forgot my password, I need
Still
a
are.
reset.
Yeah, who works on a help desk and does that kind of call? No?
Yeah.
Okay. All the time, yeah.
Yep. Other enablers there as well as, say from, if we could talk about CMD Solutions, for example, security all of a sudden becomes a differentiator to say, well, we are definitely not the slowest kid at Jurassic Park. We are very capable, we are very competent, we know what we're doing, and we're going to make your lives easier. Or say, does anyone want to throw a business at me on, or a tool set, Or who's here just for the beer?
Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those two
and
just
that, and
there.
that might be a gracious exit, actually.
Yep.
It'd be good to leave a bit of time to be able to continue to have a bit of a chat, see if there's people that need to have a chat with potential employers or whatever else, and have another beer and see yourself safely home, responsible drinking, and get to know each other and reach out on LinkedIn and check in on the next event. All right.
So-
Anything else from you guys in terms of logistics tonight? Anything we need to close off? Two organisers of our meetup tonight. Thanks,
Hey, guys.
David and Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much for coming. We really appreciate seeing you guys here. We're going to stick around for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes afterwards. Feel free to grab a beer. If there's any pizza left, grab some pizza. And there's no pizza left? No. You ate everything? That's great. Thanks very much.
Awesome.
And afterwards, we're probably going to go over the road for a few more beers over at the Royal if you guys want to join over there. So if you want to continue having an awesome time like you've had so far, that's where it's going to be at.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Guys, thanks for organising this. Well done on behalf of everyone. Thank you.